The rumble of explosions shook the earth as dust and smoke drifted through the ruins of what was once the vibrant city of New York. Now, twisted metal and charred concrete dominated the landscape, a grim testament to the relentless onslaught of the Kraith. The invaders had come from the far reaches of the universe, a cold and calculating race that systematically dismantled humanity's last defenses. They weren't here to conquer but to harvest. The Earth's resources were the prize, its inhabitants mere obstacles. In the heart of an underground military bunker miles away, deep beneath a mountain, General Arthur Meyer looked at the last hope of a dying world. A stainless steel pod, sealed tight, stood under a harsh fluorescent light. Dust and grime coated its once polished surface. Inscribed on the side were faint words, barely visible but still commanding respect: Project Steel, humanity's last line of defense. The scientists had been preparing the pod for hours, adjusting controls, checking its life support systems. General Meyer observed with weary eyes, every line on his face etched with the weight of loss and desperation. Outside, the Kraith were closing in, their drones inching closer to uncovering the hidden bunker, ready to snuff out the last embers of humanity. Dr. Elena Voss, the project's chief scientist, approached the general, her face set with a look of grim determination. "It's time," she said, her voice steady but laced with apprehension. "Project Steel is our last chance. He'll need a full briefing as soon as he wakes." Meyer nodded, staring at the pod. "Let's hope he's ready for a world far darker than the one he left behind." Dr. Voss entered the final sequence, and with a deep, ominous hum, the pod's mechanisms began to shift. Steam hissed as the cryogenic locks disengaged. Inside, a figure stirred, breaking free from decades of slumber. The frost-covered glass slowly revealed the face of Ethan Steele, a warrior from an era of hope and promise, now thrust into an existence defined by ruin. The pod doors opened, and Steele's eyes fluttered open, his body stiff as he took his first breath in half a century. His gaze, sharp and calculating, met Meyer's. A brief silence passed between them, a silent understanding between soldier and commander. "Welcome back, Steele," Meyer said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "The world needs you." Steele blinked, shaking off the last remnants of cryo-sleep, his body already adapting, his muscles loosening as if he hadn't missed a single day in the fight. "How long?" he rasped, voice rusty from disuse. 50 years. "Earth. Earth isn't what you remember," Meyer replied, the weight of his words unmistakable. Steele straightened, his mind adjusting, absorbing the surroundings, his eyes taking in the bunker's somber, functional details, the stark walls, the anxious faces of the scientists, and, most of all, the desperation in the general's face. "What's the situation?" "Total invasion," Dr. Voss interjected, pulling up a holographic map showing the spread of alien strongholds across Earth's continents. "The Kraith. They arrived 20 years ago. Our weapons, nothing we've tried works against them. Their technology neutralizes everything, nuclear, EMP, even biochemical warfare. They came prepared for everything." Steele absorbed the information with a soldier's detached calm. Years of military training had taught him to set aside emotion, to act with precision and resolve. Yet the devastation etched into the faces around him stirred something deeper, a feeling of duty, the unyielding resolve to protect the remnants of humanity. General Meyer took a step closer, his voice lowering. "You're the last resort, Steele. Our ultimate weapon. Your biomechanical modifications, the adaptability, the transformation abilities, we need you to use them. You're the only one who can face the Kraith on their terms." Steele nodded slowly, testing his joints, his senses heightened as his body instinctively adapted to the environment. He could feel the energy coursing through his veins, the bio-enhancements kicking in, calibrating to the stark reality of a war-ravaged Earth. What's the mission? Meyer pulled up a tactical display. There's a Kraith fortress in the ruins of Chicago. We believe it's a central hub controlling a vast network of their drones and biomachines. If we disable it, it could buy us time, create a gap in their network. Steele studied the hologram, memorizing every detail, every potential entry point and defensive structure. Extraction? None, Meyer said, his face grim. This is a one-way mission. Steele's expression didn't change, but a glint of determination flickered in his eyes. Understood. Within minutes, he was suited up, the resistance fighters whispering among themselves as they caught glimpses of him moving down the bunker's narrow corridor. The stories of Project Steele had become a legend, a ghostly hope passed around in dark times, and now, to see him in the flesh stirred something almost forgotten, a flicker of courage. He boarded a stealth aircraft, piloted by a veteran resistance fighter named Dana, her face weathered but resolute. As they lifted off, Steele gazed out the window at the ruins below, his thoughts a mixture of grim reflection and steely resolve. You don't talk much, do you? Dana asked, her voice cutting through the silence. Nothing to say, Steele replied, scanning the horizon, always vigilant. Dana shook her head, her expression unreadable. Well, let's hope your actions speak louder than words. They flew under radar, skimming close to the ground, avoiding Kraith patrols as they made their way to Chicago. As they approached, the skeletal remains of the city came into view, a haunting silhouette of twisted skyscrapers and collapsed bridges. The fortress loomed in the distance, a hulking mass of alien metal, pulsating with an eerie blue light. Dana landed the aircraft in a secluded spot. Steele stepped out, feeling the energy from the fortress, his adaptive senses reacting, analyzing the environment, preparing him for the encounter ahead. Dana handed him a small device, her eyes meeting his with a rare vulnerability. Good luck, Steele. For what it's worth, the world's counting on you. Steele nodded, gripping the device as he made his way toward the fortress. He moved silently, his body shifting, adapting to the darkened ruins around him. His skin took on the hue of the debris, blending seamlessly into the shadows as he crept forward. He felt his body change, his muscles elongating, enhancing his reflexes as he slipped past Kraith patrols undetected. Near the fortress entrance, he paused, observing the drones guarding it, sleek, silver machines that hovered with an almost silent hum. He analyzed their patterns, waiting for the perfect moment before darting forward, his body morphing to a leaner, faster form. With precise, deadly efficiency, he neutralized two drones with a swift motion, moving toward the access hatch. Inside, the air was thick with a sterile, metallic scent. The architecture was unlike anything human, a maze of shifting walls and glowing panels. Steele adjusted his vision, his eyes adapting to detect alien energy signatures, guiding him through the labyrinthine corridors. His body became lighter, more agile, adapting to the strange gravity within the fortress. As he moved deeper, the Kraith defenses became more intricate, with biomechanical guards and automated turrets lining the hallways. Steele's body responded instinctively, forming a hardened exoskeleton as he moved through the onslaught, deflecting blasts and returning fire with brutal precision. Every step brought him closer to the central command center, where he knew the heart of the alien operations pulsed. Finally, Steele reached the command room, a massive chamber filled with holographic displays and alien consoles. At the center stood a figure unlike the drones or guards, a Kraith commander, tall and imposing, its metallic skin gleaming under the harsh lights. Its eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Steel. "So, humanity's last soldier," the Kraith commander spoke, its voice a metallic echo. "I wondered when you would arrive." Steel didn't reply, his focus razor-sharp, analyzing his opponent's movements, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. "You are a relic," the commander continued, circling him slowly. "Your kind clings to hope, to futile resistance, yet you are outmatched. Your world is ours." Steel's expression remained steely, but his body shifted subtly, adapting to the commander's energy signature, preparing for the fight. "As long as I stand," he replied, his voice low and defiant, "this world isn't yours." The commander lunged, its body transforming mid-air, arms elongating into razor-sharp blades. Steel countered, his own arms shifting into reinforced shields, deflecting the attack and delivering a brutal counterblow. The clash was fierce and unrelenting, each strike testing the limits of his adaptability. The commander matched him move for move, a relentless opponent with no hesitation, no mercy. Steel's body responded with every impact, his form shifting to counter each of the alien's attacks. He absorbed the energy blasts, redirecting them back at the commander, his mind and body working in perfect unison. The room shook as they fought, a violent storm of power and resilience, but as the battle wore on, Steel began to falter, his body pushed to its limits. The commander's adaptability. The commander's adaptability proved a near match for Steel's abilities, each new attack feeling like a violent test of his limits. With each passing moment, Steel felt the strain deepening, his muscles burned, and his energy reserves dwindled as the alien commander seemed to draw strength from the very air around them. But Steel was no ordinary soldier. He was crafted to endure, to adapt beyond what any normal human could withstand. In a final burst of resolve, he pushed his body to absorb the alien energy pulses directly. The commander hesitated, as if calculating this unprecedented move, watching Steel's form glow faintly with the stored energy. Steel could feel the power within him shifting, transforming his skin to a hardened alloy, his arms morphing into something fierce and jagged. With a roar, Steel lunged, catching the commander off guard. His fist, now a metallic weapon of immense density, connected with the alien's head, sending it crashing against the control panel. Sparks flew, and the energy in the room fluctuated wildly. Alarms sounded as the fortress's systems began to overload. The Kraith commander staggered, its once perfect form dented and cracked, a strange liquid oozing from its wounds. "You cannot stop us," the commander rasped, its voice distorted, weakened but unyielding. Steel narrowed his gaze, his body responding with one last shift, adapting to the command center's power grid. With a single, deliberate motion, he slammed his hand into the panel, channeling the fortress's energy directly into himself. His entire being blazed with light, each muscle and cell fortified with the raw power of the Kraith's technology. The commander's eyes widened in alarm, realizing, perhaps too late, that Steel's adaptability was beyond its calculations. The final blow was swift, decisive. Steel's body, supercharged and unstoppable, drove through the commander's chest, severing its energy core. The alien let out a guttural, metallic scream, a sound that echoed through the fortress, signaling its downfall. The commander's body collapsed in a heap, lifeless, its essence dissipating like smoke into the air. Steel pulled his hand back, he felt a shudder run through the entire fortress. The walls trembled, and the lights flickered as the alien technology began to fail without its central command. He could feel his body thrumming with the alien energy he'd absorbed, his own form now a strange fusion of human and Kraith. He'd won the battle, but he knew he couldn't stay much longer. Steel sprinted through the corridors, his adaptive senses guiding him past collapsing structures and malfunctioning defenses. The fortress was tearing itself apart, a chain reaction triggered by the loss of its command center. He reached the exit and leapt through, just as the entire structure exploded in a blinding flash of blue light, sending shockwaves rippling across the desolate landscape. Steele lay on the ground, watching the remnants of the fortress dissolve into dust. He felt a strange hollowness, a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. His body, still thrumming with alien energy, was a constant reminder of how much he'd changed, how far he'd strayed from the man he once was. In the distance, he could hear the faint hum of approaching engines. He recognized the Resistance aircraft's sound before he even saw it. Dana's ship descended, hovering just above the ground, her expression a mixture of relief and awe as she saw him standing alone amidst the wreckage. "Get in," she called, extending her hand. Steele took a last look at the ruins of the fortress, then climbed aboard. The door shut behind him, sealing him back into the relative safety of the transport. As they took off, Steele slumped back, feeling the weight of his actions settling over him. He'd destroyed a significant stronghold, dealt a serious blow to the Kraith. But it wasn't victory, not yet. The war was far from over. Back at the bunker, General Meyer greeted him with a grim smile. "You did it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're seeing signs of Kraith forces pulling back in some sectors. Whatever you did, it worked." Steele nodded, though he felt little satisfaction. "It's only temporary. They'll regroup." Meyer looked at him, a silent understanding passing between them. "Then we'll fight again when they do." Steele's gaze drifted over the gathered Resistance fighters, their faces etched with hope and determination. He knew that each of them was depending on him, seeing him as something more than human, as a legend come to life. But Steele wasn't sure he wanted that mantle. He was just a soldier, a man carrying the weight of survival on his transformed shoulders. Days passed, and Steele threw himself into training the Resistance, teaching them to adapt and react with precision. His own body continued to evolve, adjusting to the alien energy he'd absorbed. He found he could manipulate it in subtle ways, generating small pulses of force or sharpening his reflexes to superhuman levels. The scientists observed him with a mix of fascination and caution, knowing he was becoming something beyond their comprehension. One night, alone in the bunker's cold, dim corridors, Steele found himself questioning his place in this new world. He'd been created for a war long past, designed to be a weapon against an enemy humanity could understand. But now, facing the Kraith, facing beings that defied conventional logic and strategy, he felt like an anomaly, a relic struggling to keep up with a conflict that constantly evolved. In those quiet moments, he thought of the life he'd left behind, of the world he'd known. It felt like a distant dream, something untouched by the destruction and despair surrounding him. He knew he couldn't go back. There was no place for him in the world he'd once called home. His purpose was here, in this war, fighting for the remnants of humanity with every fiber of his adapted being. The next offensive came swiftly. Reports flooded in that the Kraith had deployed a new wave of drones, faster and deadlier than before, equipped with adaptations mimicking Steele's own abilities. They were learning from him, adjusting their tactics, evolving in real time. Steele took to the battlefield again, his body responding instinctively as he faced off against the Kraith's improved forces. Every movement was a dance of survival, each adaptation a new step in an endless war of attrition. The Resistance fought valiantly by his side, their courage bolstered by his presence, but he knew that each victory only prolonged the inevitable. During one particularly brutal skirmish, Steele found himself surrounded, cut off from his team as the drones closed in. He pushed his body beyond its limits, shifting his form in ways he'd never attempted before, stretching his adaptability to the breaking point. He could feel something fraying within him, the strain of his enhancements pushing him perilously close to collapse, but then, in the midst of the chaos, he saw it, a weakness in the drones, a vulnerability he could exploit. He channeled every last ounce of energy, driving himself forward, tearing through the enemy with a fury that defied logic. When the dust finally settled, he stood alone, victorious yet hollow, each victory stripping away another piece of the man he'd once been. The resistance cheered, their cries echoing across the battlefield, but Steele barely heard them. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where the faint glow of the Craith's main fleet loomed, a reminder of the true enemy that still awaited him. In the following weeks, Steele continued his relentless push against the Craith, each encounter a test of his endurance and resolve. He became a symbol, a rallying point for the survivors, the last spark of hope in a world overshadowed by despair. But with each battle, he felt himself slipping further from his humanity, his body and mind irrevocably altered by the alien forces he'd absorbed. One night, as he stared into the darkness, he realized the truth: he was no longer entirely human. He was a hybrid, a fusion of Earth and Craith, a living embodiment of the war that had ravaged his world. The thought should have filled him with dread, but instead, it brought a strange sense of peace. He was what he needed to be, a weapon, a protector, a beacon in the darkness. When the final assault on the Craith's flagship began, Steele led the charge, his body a blur of power and precision as he tore through the enemy ranks. The resistance fighters followed him, their faith unwavering, their determination fierce. Together, they fought with a ferocity born of desperation, pushing forward even as the odds stacked against them. At the heart of the Craith's flagship, Steele faced the alien commander one last time. The being stood tall, its form a shimmering mass of energy and metal, an embodiment of the Craith's adaptability. They clashed in a brutal, silent struggle, each blow a testament to their resilience. In the end, it was Steele's humanity that tipped the balance. With a final, defiant surge, he drove his hand into the commander's core, channeling every ounce of energy he'd absorbed, sacrificing himself to bring down the Craith once and for all. The flagship exploded in a blinding flash, the Craith's forces scattering as their command structure disintegrated. Steele's form flickered in the light, his body dissolving into the energy he'd harnessed, his last act a silent farewell to the world he'd fought so hard to protect. When the dust settled, the resistance emerged victorious. The Craith were defeated, their invasion thwarted. But Steele was gone, his memory etched into the minds of those he'd saved, a legend, a hero, a warrior who'd given everything for humanity's survival. In the quiet aftermath, the survivors rebuilt, carrying with them the lessons of Steele's sacrifice. He had shown them what it meant to fight, to adapt, to endure. And in his final act, he had given them the one thing they'd lost so long ago: hope.